The last president who was considered a founding father is James Monroe, the 5th president of the United States. And did you know his image is very popular and can be found in some historic paintings too? Cassandra Good, the associate editor of the Papers of James Monroe at the University of Mary Washington, is here to explain Monroe's significance in our history. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning, thanks for having me.
Good. I'm a little naive. I didn't do that well in history, so bring us up to speed in his significance.
So we often like to say that James Monroe was the Forrest Gump of early American history because he is all over the place at all of the major events in early America. He's part of the American Revolution, he's part of the ratification of the Constitution, serves as ambassador to various countries in Europe, is involved in the War of 1812, and then he's an incredibly popular president. They actually named the era of his presidency the era of good feelings.
Very interesting. David Bruce Smith is here, the founder of the Grateful American Foundation as well. And how did this all get started, your involvement here with Cassandra?
Well, actually, I wasn't all that thrilled with James Monroe, but I read a squib about her book in Parade magazine, and I also read that she was involved with the Monroe Papers. So that was the beginning of the curiosity.
And then you guys talked, and did you learn more about him through talking to her that you didn't know? That changed your mind on him?
We talked later, and yes, so now I have a pretty high opinion of James Monroe. And he did much more than I thought.
And so why was he such a historic and important figure?
So many other presidents had had other posts, but he had had more public service experience than any other president up to that time, and than most other presidents after, because of that, serving overseas in so many different posts and domestic posts. And then he's also quite well known as sort of unifying the country after the War of 1812, and then best known perhaps for the Monroe Doctrine, his foreign policy statement. But there's so much more to him than just that doctrine.
Do you meet a lot of people that don't know as much about him as you think they should?
Oh yeah, they often say, oh, you mean James Madison? And no, James Monroe, who's the president after Madison, and in fact was much more popular president than Madison was.
Really? Why was that?
The War of 1812 was a deeply unpopular war, and Madison was president during that period. He hadn't had the kind of military experience that Monroe had. Monroe had been wounded in the Battle of Trenton, and people really respected him for his service. And so I think they felt more comfortable with him as a leader, and the war was over by the time he comes into office, so he inherits a sort of better situation.
You also have a book called Founding Friendships. Tell us about that book.
Sure, I've got that here so you can see the
Take
cover.
it home, and I probably should read it.
Yeah. So this book actually is not about Monroe, but about that whole generation of men and women, and the fact that men and women in this period could be close friends. And we might question whether that's possible even today, but in fact, this was quite common among elite men and women. All the founding presidents had female friends. You see Jefferson and Abigail Adams on the cover, who were close friends, and these were actually friendships that allowed women to become involved in politics.
David, last question goes to you. I always like this because you always give us a piece of history to walk away with. What did you learn about James Monroe that you can leave us with that was really interesting?
Okay, so Monrovia, Liberia. He is the only president with a foreign capital named after him. He is also the only president who had 2 cabinet positions simultaneously, Secretary of War, Secretary of State. And he and George Washington were the only presidents who ran in their second terms unopposed.
I feel like those questions will come up on Jeopardy at some point, and now I will know thanks to you guys. David, thanks for all you do on getting people interested in history again, and it's really important. And Cassandra, great job with your book and everything and being on with us here on Let's Talk Live today.
Thank you.
Great to meet you and great to learn something new. For more information about James Monroe, you can visit the museum dedicated to him in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It's jamesmonroemuseum.umw.edu. And for more information about David Bruce Smith's Grateful American Foundation, visit grateful american foundation.com. More of Let's Talk Live in just a moment.